If I had been taught marketing this way when I was in college, I would have quit after my first class, which is probably why they made it so stinking confusing, because you have to stick around because you're still like trying to figure out, what am I trying to learn? What should I take away from this? Yeah, that's kind of the worst. Hello, my name is Adam Garceau, and this is my podcast episode about Mark Ritson and basically marketing strategy. How should you do marketing strategy? How does marketing strategy work? And so you've probably heard of Mark Ritson, because I know, in the past week or two, which has been making me go back into my old school style of marketing that I learned in marketing school, in marketing class. And it's been really cool and eye-opening to see the things that people at the very top are doing. And the reason why I jumped into that is because I've been writing the strategy for a semi-large, medium-ish DTC brand for supplements. And so I've been digging into the big picture and what that should look like. And so we're going to go into that, like what's the important things and what order should you do everything in. And it really clears up a whole lot of stuff that I learned on the internet, and what's right and what's not, and why every single influencer that's ever talked about marketing on the internet is BS. Welcome to the podcast. My name's Adam with Grab Your Assets, and before we go any further, I just want to plug what I do. I help CPG brands figure out what kind of content they should be making so that they can scale profitably. If that's something that interests you, then go ahead and reach out. I'm not going to bore you to death or try to offer you any sort of incentive. I'm not going to tell you something that's too good to be true. There's no crazy offer. I just simply want to help you, and I have got results in the past, and I will share results that I get in the future when I do other projects. Some of my projects have gotten millions of views on TikTok. I've gotten like a 3 ROAS from some of my creative, and then others of my creative have gotten conversions for less than $4 a piece. If that's something that you're interested in, then go ahead and send me an email, adam@grabyourassets.com. I'd be excited to work with you, or just send you a proposal to see if that's the kind of thing that you want. I've specialized in UGC content, YouTube, TV ads, and all sorts of other kinds of stuff. And with that, let's continue with the show. I don't have a Patreon. I should probably get one, but right now I'm just having a lot of fun. If I had been taught marketing this way when I was in college, I would have quit after my first class, which is probably why they made it so stinking confusing, because you have to stick around because you're still like trying to figure out, what am I trying to learn? What should I take away from this? Yeah, that's kind of the worst. So let me dive into here. So there are 4 steps that Mark Ritson outlines, and I've been digging into them. One day, maybe I will do his mini MBA and learn from the man himself. But right now, I'm actually just having a lot of fun because I'm revisiting some old things that I thought I should just ignore, because Alex Hormozi wasn't talking about it, Gary Vee wasn't talking about it, Alex Becker wasn't talking about it. However, I will caveat that with, there are certain things that you could do and just make tons of money and never do anything else in your life and be okay. So you definitely don't need all of these things. You don't need to know this unless you're in a position to, and most people are not. I'd say only, I don't know, maybe like 5% of marketers, that might be too high. 5% of marketers are in a position to actually need this kind of stuff, right? So this is really cool that I have the opportunity to like dive in and start start just going down a rabbit hole, because that's what I do best and that's what I love. But this is definitely something you want to know about before you start listening to the rest of my podcast. That's why I'm probably going to reference the first 5 episodes, like the rest of the show and the rest of my life, because these are pillar pieces of content, and I'll probably update and add more pillar type stuff to this as I go. But the first 5 episodes are going to be really like a good jumping point for you to figure out, what can I do for you? Maybe what are some things you can do for yourself? Once you start diving down the same rabbit hole I did, and you go, you know what, maybe I just want somebody who knows what they're talking about, somebody who's done it before, to just do it for me, then you just reach out to me. So there's 4 steps. The 4 steps are: 1, diagnose. Because from my medical background, from being an EMT and doing the pre-nursing program and everything, like, yeah, that's like the first thing you got to do. If you want to figure out, like, the thing is, like, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Are you a new company, or are you a company that's starting to stagnate because you haven't been focusing on your brand enough? So like let's diagnose, like, what are the problems? There could be organizational issues, managerial issues. It could be just the marketing mix that you have. Maybe you're not in the right places. Maybe you're not diversifying. Maybe you're not using the right messaging. Like, let's figure it out. Like, decide what the problem is first, and then we'll try to solve it. And I do have some points written about that, and I'll just go to that really quick. So diagnose, the first thing that I would look at is what Alex Hormozi calls LTGP to CAC, or some people just call LTV to CAC. Now, that's a bunch of words. Lifetime gross profit is LTGP, and that is basically how much your customers pay you for your product subtracting how much it costs you to produce and ship it to them. So how much it costs you to fulfill. So if that's a product, or if it's a service, how much does it cost you to fulfill that service, right? And then CAC is customer acquisition cost. So that is how much does it cost you to get a customer, and CAC is pretty much your marketing plus your sales. So it's how much you spend when you pay a media buyer to or somebody to run ads for you on Facebook. If you pay door knockers to go knock doors for you, how much are you spending? And then that ratio is super important. If you at least have like a 2-to-1, you're treading water, you're doing okay. You're not like scaling to the moon, and you're not going to explode, skyrocket super fast, but you're probably doing okay. If you're less than 2, I'd get a little bit worried. And we will talk about in a different episode how to figure out what your LTGP to CAC is. But just know that according to Alex Hormozi, if it's 3-to-1, if you can find all those numbers, and one of the things you really need to stay away from is trying to calculate every single expense as these, because it's basically an efficiency ratio for your marketing machine for dollars in, dollars out. So a 3-to-1 would mean that for every $1 you put in, you get $3 out, right? You might have heard of ROAS, or return on ad spend, which Sabri Subi talks about so famously, and lots of marketers bring up ROAS, like super important. It is, but only for when the actual at the ad level, how much money did you spend on ads before you got a customer? So for every dollar you spend, but that's different from CAC, because that's not including all of your marketing costs. And so we're not going to add in any overhead costs, like when you pay a janitor or when you pay somebody to come and do a couples massage for you and your wife. That's not what we're talking about. If that's money that comes out of your business, that's overhead, and we'll address overhead differently. But Alex Hormozi has basically said 3-to-1, and you can scale to the moon. His portfolio brands are usually doing 15 to 20 to 1, and then his company is usually acquisitions, usually doing like 30 to 1. So that's the first thing that I would look at, is just figure out the numbers. And the great thing is that based on your LTGP to CAC, when we get into more like the tactics section, there are answers to like ways to raise LTGP and ways to lower CAC. But just want you to know, on a basic level, there's lots of numbers that you could try. And I have used this to manipulate numbers for small businesses to help them figure out like if what we're spending on ads is actually effective and is actually profitable, or if they're breaking even. Super important, because if your cost per lead is like $20 per lead, but it doesn't matter because they're still paying you a ton, then the cost to acquire a customer wasn't $20, it was more than that, right? So in a basic sense, if you're a pest control company and you're paying the media buyer to run the ads, and you're also paying for however much you pay to get a lead, right? And then on top of that, you're not just paying for the lead, you're paying at the conversion level when somebody becomes a sale. Like, how much did you actually pay about $100 to get them to be a customer at that point, right? So we can go dive into that deep, but it's super important and super helpful in diagnosing basically the nuts and bolts of a business and what you can do to fix that. And there's so many different ways. If you can think about it in this way, it's so simple and so easy, because there's a lot of other metrics that I will get into that are super important for measuring like your brand health and stuff like that. But this is super good. So I'd start there. And the next thing I would talk about is just let's look at the problem. So are your sales dropping? Is your CAC too high? Is your CAC rising? Is it becoming increasingly expensive for you to get a customer? And then we could talk about what are the potential causes of that, right? What are you focusing on? Is your company focusing on weekly metrics, and that's why you're just so short-sighted? Like, you should be focusing on yearly metrics instead? Or is there a misunderstanding of your brand's purpose? Is there a missing foundational brand strategy that just isn't there, that everybody should be able to get behind one goal and one big priority, but you don't have that? Yeah, there's lots of things. Look at your brand and what that might be. Well, so the big problems are sales dropping and high CAC. So some of those are so I've gone through and just talked about what are some things that might possibly cause those. Misunderstanding about branding, misunderstanding about how marketing works in general, what's a campaign and how does it work, or different managers attacking the same problem and not knowing it until they've both gotten pretty deep and they know that they're just trying to solve the same thing, but just from a different area, and they should just work together at that point, or pass it off to the person who's best suited to solve the problem. Yeah. So anyway, that's diagnosis. Once you get to diagnosis, then we can talk about strategy, which is kind of like how to fix that. But LTGP to CAC, I would start talking about tactics. I would bring that up again back in the tactics section. And strategy section, we want to talk about STP, which is something that I learned in marketing class that was in textbook, and everything. That's oh, well, I'm never going to need that. All I need is Alex Hormozi and Gary V. So according to Mark Ritson, you want to ask 3 questions. Who are we targeting? What do we want to stand for? And how will we achieve this? And so that's basically segmentation, positioning, objectives. And so in segmentation, I just talk about STP, which is actually segmentation, targeting, positioning. So positioning is already kind of couched in that. But I like putting acronyms together, especially if I find an acronym that I like. So STP, the first thing we're going to talk about is segmentation. So segmentation is really just figuring out like, what's my category and what are all the mini segments of people in there that I want to target. Now, you should probably be a little bit more broad nowadays, especially with AI targeting, because AI really does most of the specific targeting for you. You don't have to do hardly any of that these days. Really, what you need to do is pick a group that you're going to target, moms aged 20 to 40, and that's a segment. A category would be people who are interested in health, right? So that could be big, like people trying to optimize their health. So what kinds of groups are under that? Who's trying to optimize their health? Because there's people that aren't, right? So, or is it everybody? I mean, you really shouldn't try to target everybody, especially if you're brand new. But if you're a massive brand like Nike, then you should. That is your audience. But they also do segmented campaigns, right? So, for example, on Marketing Week, there's a good video about Gillette. They have their broad branding that they do on TV that's targeting basically everyone, and then anyone and everyone that would possibly want to use a razor like that, a disposable razor. And then they've done some segmented campaigns like partnering with video games like Madden and partnering with like on a release or something like that. And so that's mainly targeted at gamers who shopped at Walmart, and that was a really good one. I would recommend looking at that. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about segmenting. And then Gary Vee talks about getting like really, really specific, like even like way more specific, and just making lots of different kinds of content for lots of different audiences. And when you're doing social media, you could do stuff like that, but you'd have to pick like a few to start targeting and stuff, but that can get dizzying and that can get difficult. When you're running ads, AI is now so dang good that it just finds the right people that are most likely to buy, because Facebook like making money, so they like making you money too, because if they make you money, then you spend more money on them. That's how that works. So they've optimized their AI to make it easier for you to make money. Isn't that cool? The difficulty now is just making creative that targets those segments really well, that's specific for those segments, so that the AI will correctly match you up with the right person. So like say you're a dentist and you're gonna make an ad that literally is just like, do you have broken teeth? Hey, are you in the greater Tempe, Arizona area and you have broken teeth? That's how specific you need to be if you're a local business. But if you're a DTC brand, you really just need to be like, hey mom, are you having a hard time feeding your kids properly? Getting your kids to eat the right foods that are actually good for them? Is it easier to feed them stuff that they hate eating, or stuff that you hate feeding them but they love to eat? You know, that kind of stuff. You get into that segmentation, and then we're really talk about messaging later, because that's more important tactically, I'd say. But it is part of your overall strategy, like what kind of messaging do you want to use, what's your brand tone, and that kind of stuff. So who are we targeting? That's the first thing that you need to know about. Like, who's the customer? Because the customer should come first, even before product, even before service, even before anything else. You should know why you're doing it and who you're targeting and who it's for. And then once you have that firmly in your mind, it's funny because I remember that in marketing school, we learned about making customer avatars, and you should have them posted and pasted all over your office so that everybody can see it. So you can think about that person. You know, if the Garrett who drives a Subaru and has 5 kids and drinks low alcohol content IPAs, you can put him up and you can look at him when you're thinking about it. It's a mental game thinking about who you're making it for, but that's super important to actually have top of mind, right? So once you've done your segmentation, targeting is actually when you decide which segments you're going to go after, and you make content specifically for those target audiences. And you might post that on your social media. You might also go in and put those categories when you run ads, but hardly ever do you do that anymore. Nobody's doing that. So I would say you're targeting now with the kind of creative that you make and where those people hang out, which is going to be in tactics. And then the next thing is position. Now, you want to have a good position statement, not because you're going to tell people about it, but because you need to understand what your position is. And then people, when they ask you like, what are they for? What are they about? People should know just by seeing your stuff. You shouldn't have to say it. But like, for example, Kit Kat, for the longest time, for like over 3 decades, they've had the exact same position statement, same positioning. They help people have little breaks during their day. It's break. And nobody can fight them on that. I mean, you can try to, but they've dug such a big moat and they have so much experience in that. And that is them. Like, if Twix said break, like that wouldn't make any sense. Break me off a piece of that Twix doesn't make any sense, or anything else for that matter. They've really become the incumbent of break. And so if anybody else tries to fight them on it, it's just difficult. So yep, that's one way you build a deep moat around your brand. And that's why it's so important to kind of look at the market and see how everybody else is positioned and see how you can position yourself uniquely to do something different than everybody else. So that way it's hard for them to compete with you. So that way they have to fight a stinking dragon and capuchin monkey and swim across a moat of alligators and then lava and alligators who swim in lava to be able to try to even attempt to attack your castle, you know? So that's the way you have to think about it. Like, how can, instead of thinking a little bit of what they're doing, no. How can I make it so hard for anybody to compete with me? And that takes a little bit more thinking, and it's a little bit harder, but it's definitely more worth it. So it's really like, what do you want to stand for in the customer's mind? What do you want customers to think about you? How do you want them to think about you? And in that positioning, you need to think about certain brand codes, which is like ditties that you sing, songs, colors, sounds, skits, like stuff like that. Stuff that's repeatable, shareable, relatable. Those kinds of brand codes that people recognize, you know, when they see that, they associate it with your brand. And you want to increase the amount of times they associate with your brand. They think of your brand, right? And so you want to make it easy. There's a used car salesman in town. It's really the only used car lot that I know about. The owner's like voice was so distinct, and I worked at a job where we had the radio going all the time, and you were just like, man, like this guy is awesome, also really annoying. But the thing is that if I were to think about used cars, I would think about him first. It's the first place I would go. Or if I didn't know about him, I might just drive down the street and stop at the first used car lot that I see and go buy a car. That's a terrible way to do it. I actually wouldn't do that. I would just look on Google Maps, and I would look at all the used car lots in my area, look at reviews. Anyway, but that's the important thing though, is if I was thinking, if I had to go buy a used car from anybody specifically, who's top of mind for me, it's that guy. And that's what you want to be. It's like, how can you be top of mind? And then the next thing is, how will we achieve this? What are our objectives? Because you need to have some SMART goals. If you haven't heard about it, it's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right? Look up SMART goals. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about it, but I feel like it's been beat to death. Like, I learned it in Boy Scouts, heard about it in the military, heard about it again in marketing classes, and I hear about it constantly. Like, I always hear about SMART goals. It's just a thing. You need to really make these SMART goals, and they should be 3 to 4 objectives. Like, in the next 12 months, I want to increase brand affinity with this audience by 7%. Like, people like Garrett by 7% or 10% or something like that. Like, people who don't like us, we want them to like us in 12 months by this much. And then let everything else burn. Honestly, like, just don't focus on anything else until number 1 is fixed. If number 1 is fixed, go on to number 2. And once you've gotten through that whole list, then you start over with a new list. That's how targeted and specific I would be about it. Because priority used to be just like, what's the most important thing? What is your priority? The most important thing you could be doing right now, right? And not priorities, plural, but somebody decided that you should have multiple things that are the most important. But how does that make sense? That the most important thing turns into the most important things that are all equal importance. There should typically just be one thing that's more important than the rest. So figure out your SMART goals, your list of SMART goals, based on like, what exactly do you want to have happen in the next 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, or the next like 30 days. If you're in an emergency mode, you probably in the next 30, 90 days, you probably want to make some sort of quick turnaround, right? And then you want to be focused on the long term for the long game. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, we'll talk a little bit about tactics. And tactics, I'm going to bring up something that most marketers don't hear about, especially if they didn't go to school for it. The 4 Ps of marketing. It's been rewritten and rehashed, and people have tried to replace the 4 Ps of marketing with basically the other things that I already told you about like before. The 4 Ps of marketing were meant to describe what you tactically do, like the tactics of marketing, and it was never supposed to be about all marketing. So don't try to encompass that into like a certain list of points. Like, it can get crazy. Like, people have like the 12 Ps, the 40 Ps, the 1 Q and 3 Cs, or whatever the heck you want to talk about. It's insane. But I just want to talk about the 4 Ps because it seems like they still work, and Mark Ritson says they work, and I listen to him. It's been really cool to kind of see it come full circle as I'm trying to look at big strategy like this, and I'm realizing that a lot of it is just the same stuff that I learned and I should have just picked out from my textbook. Product, price, place, and promotion. These are the things that marketers should be concerned with. Like, if you're not doing product and price, and you're basically, place is like distribution, but they needed to make it into a P. If you're only running ads and you're just a media buyer, like you're not technically a marketer if you're not involved with the product or the price or the promotion. So product is what you're selling. So once you've figured out, that's why in the strategy you figure out your targeting and your segmentation and targeting first, and you figure out your position first, like who are we going to be? Because actually, who's more important than what, and then why is more important than how. So here we are at the how, and it's all based on our customer. Like, let's make this product for them, right? You make a remarkable product for yourself or for a certain amount of people around you, and you're not trying to think of this as a big brand strategy. You're just saying, oh man, it'd be really handy for John if he had this, and you make it for John. Turns out Bill likes it too. Turns out Benny likes it too, and then you've got a business on your hands, right? So you could literally start with a market, an audience, and say, what else do they need that they're missing, that they don't know they're missing? Or what could we do better than other people to, serve them that? And that's a huge thing, because that's what they do at like Fortune 500 and Fortune 50 companies. They have whole divisions based on just trying to figure out, okay, what other products can we add? How else can we sell stuff? And when I talk about product, I will probably talk a little bit about value ladder, like what you sell to people first. What sales funnel you're going to make is dependent on what you're trying to sell and what market you're selling to. Maybe you start out by selling a $7 PDF, and then you try to upsell them to a subscription to your product. And then after that, you're like in insider mode, or you do consulting with them at the top of that, whatever. Like, you could start with a low value product, and then your goal there is to keep upselling them. And it's actually, there's some psychology behind it. You can sell somebody a $7 product, and then after that, once they've bought one thing from you, it doesn't have to be even a big thing. They will spend enormous amounts of money on you, like $5,000 right after that. People are doing this. This is a thing that happens. Product is really important. It's important to think of your value ladder, but really the first thing is just make one minimal viable product, because you can get crazy going into features on products and trying to make it do lots of different things. Yeah, it's just stupid. But like, really what you need is you have to come up with a product, figure out a product that works and does the basic job that the person needs them to do. And then you can figure out like fancy features later. But what does it need to be in order to start making money, in order to start being useful for your market? And then don't go past that. Just stop there and make it really good, make a good minimal viable product. Start selling it, and then start adding upgrades and stuff to it later, because people are going to want that. Like, your job then at that point is to iteratively test and figure out how you can improve. But not right now if you're brand new. If you have been doing DTC for a while, you'll notice that the brands that do really well are the ones that invest a lot in product and improving things for their customers. If that's making different flavors, if that's just making different ways for them to take it, you make a powder, you make a gummy, you make a whatever. Price is important because price tells a story, and what you do with price and how you manipulate price is extremely important. Most people don't understand it. There's not really like do's and don'ts. There's only like, what do you want, Do you want people to think that you have like the highest quality in a luxury product? Then you price it high and you don't ever give it a discount, right? Maybe you make it so exclusive that only a certain amount of people can buy it. Like, that's really stinking important with price. And then also, do you do discounts? It's like, do you want to do that or do you not want to do that? There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's not a right or a wrong decision. There's just decisions, right? So price, so the right decision, if you want it to be a luxury brand or be a premium brand selling a premium product, the right decision might be to never discount it and just keep the same price, and the price doesn't change. And then there's others where if you're just trying to sell lots of volume and lots of stuff, then you do discounts and you do stuff like that. Next thing we talk about is place. Now, distribution, it's like just figuring out, where do your people hang out? Like, if they only ever read magazines, then why would you ever run a TV ad? But that's not true. So place, people are typically all over the place, and TV is not going away. I don't know why people think that TV is dying. It's not. It's actually doing very well. And some newer brands that have never been on TV before are jumping into it and finding out. I'd say, yeah, like TV targets just about everyone. It's the broadest top of funnel you can have. You got TV, radio, any sort of digital platforms, but it's just basically about figuring out where all your people hang out and then being where they are. And then once you master one platform, you gather another platform, and you can see like it'll incrementally increase the amount of money that your brand makes because you're just everywhere. And then you should be at the point where everybody knows about who you are because you're everywhere. And promotion is basically what you say and how you communicate why it's priced the way that it is and why it's worth what it's worth. And that can be the words that you say. And it kind of goes hand in hand with place because, you talk a different way, you post differently on different platforms. And you're not gonna put the same kind of content on Facebook as you are gonna put on TikTok in a lot of cases, or YouTube. Like it's just different. And then yeah, like what kind of message are you trying to send to people? What do you want people to know about it? And then that's really when I get into my messaging stuff, and I'm really excited about it, like what you do and don't say. But just know that there are 5 stages of customer awareness, and they're kind of like sub-stages of these 3 main stages. The customer journey is awareness, consideration, conversion. Now, there's more that people can break it down, but that's the main thing. People become aware of you. People, at some point, you want to get them to consider you, and then at some point you want them to say that they're ready to buy, right? Conversion is when they buy. So that could be sales, that could be when they click on the cart and they add to cart and they give you money. In the awareness section, there's unaware, and I'd say like maybe problem aware. They might be unaware of the problem that you solve, or they might be not aware of your brand. They might be aware that there's a problem and that somebody solves it, but they might not be aware that you exist. So I put those two kind of together. Like they're like not aware of the problem and not aware of your brand. And then the problem aware is that these people know about the problem. So all you really need to do at that point is tell them, hey, there's this problem, right? Like hair loss, right? And you go, oh, that's me. I got hair loss. And then you talk about the problem and the next thing, and then solution aware is they know that there's a solution, but they may not know about the wide variety of products available in the market. And your job there at that point is to talk about which product does, how it solves the problem, some of the problems caused by other solutions in the market that try to solve the same problem. And then you get to product aware, which is they're aware of your product, or they're aware of the many products in the market, and they're aware of how they're all differentiated, and they're aware that they have different options. Customers don't see like competition. They just see options. They say, I could pick this one or this one. Is this for me or is this for me? And you want them to think it's for them, right? So at that stage, if they are product aware, your job is to just tell them why they should pick you over others. And I'm sure you can think of all sorts of things for that. Once they get to the point where they have so much understanding of what's going on, then hopefully they're most aware. And most aware means that they like you and they would buy if they were given a reason to. Sometimes that comes with, something crazy like 50% off or buy one, get one free. And it's like, okay, I'm going to buy it now because it's a really good deal. And I've been thinking about it, so I'm going to go for it. I'm ready to pull the trigger. That's when you just give an offer. And sometimes that's just like one graphic with an offer, right? So you need to take the customer through all of these stages, or sometimes you just start with product aware if customers are already up to that point, and you still need to let them know about your brand, so they're still unaware of your brand, but then you can jump straight into being product aware. The kinds of stories you want to tell at those different stages are different, and you want to make sure that, and the order does matter somewhat, and so you want to make sure that they get told the right thing in the right order, right? Because like why they should care is what they find out in the unaware stage and the problem aware stage. And so they need to know that before they're going to care about how your product works or what it's going to do or why it's better than everybody else's doodad that you make, right? So doesn't that make sense? They need to know why. People care more about why you do what you do than they care about what you do. Then what you're going to do is plug that in the various different ways and methods. That framework is like the top of the line marketing framework. That comes from a book called Breakthrough Marketing, and it's like $150. And you go to like Titan Marketing, I think is the name of the company, and they have the rights to sell the print. It's $150, but that's way cheaper than the $2,000 or $3,000 you'll spend on marketing courses trying to learn the same information. And as I dug through, I found that, and I was like, oh, well, that's an obvious, like that's a for sure we're doing it. So I got that book, and it basically made my entire like capstone project in school like useless to me. I was like, I should have just bought this book, because everybody else was saying the exact same things that he says in that book, and they're just all disconnected. I found like 60 references saying basically the same things, and then I found stuff that was missing from what everybody was talking about that was just in that book. So it's like, oh my gosh, Eugene Schwartz passed on, but bless the man, like he is like the best. He's the best of all time. So book from the 60s when they started, like TV started becoming a thing. It's really cool. Yeah, it's funny because now people are talking about TikTok the way that they probably were talking about TV. You should read about how he hears about people talking about TV. People talked about TV like they talk about TikTok now. Like, oh, that's just a fad. It's whatever. It's just a bunch of young kids being stupid and being silly. It's like, that's not a big deal at all. Like, people still say that about TikTok. It's hilarious. So after that, we get into measurement, and there's certain things that you want to measure depending on how big you are and how small you are. But we're going to get back again to LTGP to CAC. You want to raise LTGP and lower CAC. So raising the number on top is often quicker and easier and better than trying to lower the bottom number, which will probably only keep increasing. The two big things you can do. The main thing you can do to raise LTGP is just raise your prices and then justify raising those prices. There's all sorts of videos about raising your prices and how to do it and the right way to go about it. And I'll probably talk about this in depth later. But pretty much inside there, you've got your lifetime value, your lifetime gross profit, and you want to raise your prices. That's probably the first thing that you should try to do. The other thing you can try to do is make it cheaper to deliver. If you can do that without lowering quality, or if you're not interested in keeping the same quality, then go for it. But that's a brand killer. Raising your lifetime value is important, or getting people to buy more stuff after they've already purchased from you. It's much cheaper to sell a new product to people who've already bought a cheaper product from you than it is to try to sell a more expensive product to them to start with, right? So you sell them a cheaper product and then you add to your value ladder, which is something that, let me look in here, .com Secrets, Russell Brunson, my good ladies and gentlemen, it's on my shelf. It's in there. That's something that he talks about, and it totally makes sense. You just want to sell them more stuff and you want to keep upselling. And so if you can get them to buy more stuff and ascend your value ladder, then you make more money off of that person compared to the first time that you bought from them, right? If you can upsell them more than it cost you to acquire the customer in the first purchase, then you're like printing money. And the next thing is CAC. CAC, you should understand that brand is a CAC killer, and you really just need like a really strong founder who makes really good content, or you need to have done the strategy part really well and the positioning part really well to the point that you've got some fame or you've got some notoriety, and then CAC can basically be zero if you have a really good brand. And so I'd love to really get into that, but I mean, I just focus on LTGP and CAC and the things that affect those. And that's how I measure. Like, I would measure that ratio above everything else. That measurement, LTGP and CAC and LTGP to CAC matter more than anything else. But, however, there are a lot of other things that matter. So we will get into those more. You need to measure the things that you cared about when you made your 3 to 4 objectives, right? And that's what you're measuring for again. And so you would keep measuring them, consistently to see that they're going up. And if they're going down, revisit and figure out what is it that you need to change in your tactics. And hopefully you figure your strategy out super well. So then your tactics just follow. And the thing is, by the end of this, it's all going to feel so stinking simple and so obvious to you. And that's the whole point. Like, make something that's so complex and difficult to do and create seems so simple that it could be in a one-pager. So that is my take on Ritson and the things that he talks about. I think he's pretty stinking smart. I've been doing more research and more connecting of the dots, and the dots are just connecting like super well. And it really jives with the way that I think. So I'm going to come up with some sort of cheat sheet thing for that. But basically, we get to the point where I'm going to say goodbye. But before that, just a reminder, if you are interested in differentiating yourself and positioning yourself differently from your target audience, then I would download my free creative audit cheat sheet that contains a gap analysis and shows you how you can be different from the rest of your market, how you can stand out and dig a deep moat around your brand so that nobody else can compete with you. You want to look at what everybody's doing, and then also, more importantly, what they're not doing and what you could do better than them. And so that is something that I would look at, and it's just kind of a little bit of a mind shift. If you look at that and you decide that you would like some help, then you can reach out to me and I can definitely do a creative audit for you. It will cost something, but not an enormous amount. If you're spending more than $10,000 a month or more on ads and you're a DTC brand that wants 2 to 3x ROAS. Okay, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.